This is Support is Sexy, episode 333, with life coach Suzy Carroll. Welcome to Support is Sexy. I'm your host, Elaine Fluker, entrepreneur, author, and founder of Chic Rebellion Media. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, I interview inspiring women entrepreneurs who share their wins and their lessons to help you take your business and your life to the next level and create something sexy. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Support is Sexy. Happy Monday. I'm so happy to have you here. It just would not be the same without you. And today I am so excited to welcome Suzy Carroll. Suzy Carroll is a life coach and course facilitator. And what I love about Suzy's episode is she really is open with us, as so many of the women are, who I really, really appreciate. But Suzy is very open with us about her own experiences growing up, her journey to self-discovery and self-awareness and forgiveness. So I know you're really going to be able to relate to her story, even if it's not exactly what you've been through in your journey, but I'm positive there will be parts of it that you can certainly relate to. If nothing else, you will appreciate her vulnerability. So what Suzy talks to us in this episode overall is about our addiction to busyness. And I don't know if you're guilty of this. I certainly am. Sometimes I think I'm handling business when really I'm getting caught up in my own busyness. Anybody else? Am I the only one? Okay, so that's what Suzy talks to us about today. In addition to that, Suzy talks about how to, quote unquote, launch the thought and let go of the how. Also, how to know if you're addicted to success, how to incorporate transition time into your day, the very real dangers of not slowing down, the first step to breaking the cycle of overwhelm, very important tip there, why there's no perfect way to meditate, thank goodness, I was happy to hear that, also the truth about balance, and how to build a powerful support network. And you know, we're all about that because support is sexy. So again, I know you're going to enjoy this episode with Suzy. Suzy, thank you so much for your openness and sharing with us. It was incredible. All right, so now without further ado, Suzy Carroll. So Suzy, thank you so much for joining us for an episode of Support is Sexy. I'm excited to chat with you.
Oh, my pleasure.
So our first question, when did you first fall in love with entrepreneurship?
I was probably around 12 years old and started what so many of us women do, babysitting, and realized how much I love earning money. Mm-hmm. But there is also something in me that also liked to be able to do this on my own schedule to a certain extent. But the seed was planted. It's like, okay, I can create something on my own. And I loved that.
Where did you grow up? Where were you doing this babysitting?
It was in the suburbs of Seattle. Okay. And yeah.
How would you describe yourself as a young person growing up in Seattle?
I was very insecure, but that came from, as many of us are at a young age, but I was extremely insecure. My mom was a full-on narcissist. So I was, from a very young age, there was nothing I could do that was good enough. Mm. But the silver lining in that, which also became the catalyst for what I do today, is I was very driven because I was always striving to be enough. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
How would you, was your mom, I don't know if diagnosed is the right word, but for lack of a better word, diagnosed as a narcissist, or is this something that you became aware of as you got older? And I ask that because I have friends who have been in relationships and even married to people who have been, quote unquote, clinically diagnosed as a narcissist. It's not just something, you're just calling them a name, right? So right. People don't know sometimes that it's an actual, considered a personality almost disorder.
Mm-hmm, it is.
Yes.
It's actually very rare for a narcissist to get clinically diagnosed because they usually, if they're going in to get therapy, it's because they're depressed, because narcissists have the bar set so high that they're setting themselves up for constant failure. And there's different types of narcissists. There's grandiose narcissist. I forget the term that my mom would fall into. So she was never clinically diagnosed, but I myself was going to therapy. And through that process, the therapist put my mom in that category of narcissist. And then later in life, I read a book called Will I Ever Be Enough for Daughters of Narcissist Mothers? And I highly recommend that to anyone. I don't know of anything that's specifically out there for men, but they would probably glean a wealth of information from that. But yeah, it's a mental illness.
I'll make sure I link to that book for everyone. Will I Ever Be Enough for Daughters of Narcissist Mothers? Yeah. So now, were you an only child growing up, or did you have siblings?
No, I was an only child, which compounded it because I lived under a microscope. And I actually, I was around 19 or 20, I actually attempted suicide. And that is how deep my insecurity and my, I just had no sense of self-worth whatsoever.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I know that's a deeply personal thing, and I know, having been there myself when I was about 14, and I attempted suicide for different reasons of feeling sort of alone and depressed and not sure where I fit in the world. But I know that's something that's not always easy to share, but it's a powerful thing to let people know they're not alone. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
When were you in therapy? Was it when you were a teenager or as you got older?
As I got older, I've been in and out of therapy for pretty much most of my adult life. And I'm one of these people, I love going to a therapist. I love
therapists too.
I love those light bulb moments. I love it when I figure out something about myself, that when that piece of that puzzle falls into place. So for me, even though sometimes it's really hard, it's also really exciting to understand.
Yeah, I tell people that therapy helps you talk through, the things that you're thinking about anyway.
Exactly.
Right. It's on your mind anyway, so there's no shame in that. So what were your aspirations growing up? Did you know what you wanted to do when you got older?
I had no idea. I can tell you from age 12 on, and this is very odd for someone that young, my only aspiration was I wanted to move out of my house.
Because it was so much pressure.
It was so much pressure, and I can remember fantasizing. I in some respects, I was really fortunate. I had my mom that was extraordinarily hard to live with and emotionally abusive, and then I had my dad, who was a wonderful, wonderful man. So I did have some balance in there. But I remember fantasizing about having my dad teach me how to balance a checking account so I could get my own apartment. I hadn't quite at that time figured out the money part of it. So, my aspiration when I was young is I just wanted to move out. And the minute I was out of high school, I actually moved in with my best friend's family.
And you've been out ever since?
I've been out. Oh, there was one time I did have to head home for a wee bit, but it didn't last for long. But yeah, other than that, I've been out ever since.
Is your mom still alive now?
No, she passed away a couple of years ago.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I was going to ask you, what is your relationship like with her now?
Very well.
Very well. Now it's all good.
I actually have this very deep sense of peace, because understanding that my mom had a mental illness and her death for me brought, it would be a whole nother podcast session. It brought so many lessons and so much understanding, and I felt I navigated it with so much grace that I feel really good about how it all ended. But I also feel very happy for my mom to know that she's free.
And she's free. Excellent. Yeah. So what would you say that your experiences growing up and having a mom with mental illness and just, experiencing that for yourself, how has that helped you in the work that you went on to do, the work that you do today, I should say?
Oh, well, the work I do today comes completely from this, as a child, never being enough, But as a result of that, this is the silver lining. When we look at especially our childhood stories or early adulthood stories, there's so many pearls in there. And for me, the pearls were there was something just so dialed in me to always strive to be more. Now, I had it to an extreme, which drove me to busyness and into overwhelm. But nevertheless, it was those traits of, how can I be better? How can I be more? What can I, and also what can I bring to the world? And how can I help people? That drove me for literally decades. Mm-hmm. But it was that, I've always, I thought about this for a long time until I finally figured out what was it in me that I found me always striving for more. And because I could have just gotten stuck and withered away in depression, and that didn't happen. And for me, the key was, the silver lining was I didn't feel like I was enough. So I was always one foot in front of the other, trying to be more.
And that's an interesting realization for people listening, the difference between, of course, most of us, especially the listeners of this podcast, are striving and wanting to do more in the world and accomplish things and new goals and that kind of thing, versus when you're doing it because you feel like you're not enough.
Yes.
Right. And knowing and being able to know the difference, whether that's on your own or, as we mentioned earlier, through help with therapy and figuring out, why do I have this feeling? Is it healthy for me?
Exactly. Yeah. It's and what I teach in my coaching and my courses is to discover what discover what the need is, the unmet need is under the pushing and the striving and the over-pleasing and overdoing. And when you discover what that need is, so for example, for me, it was a need to be appreciated, which, going back to my childhood, was this desire to be loved and appreciated for who I am by my mother. But it also led in adulthood to a whole lot of saying yes, because I wanted to be appreciated, I wanted to fit in, and I needed to feel like I was important. Mm-hmm. As opposed to saying yes or pleasing, being in that pleasing mode because it filled something in my soul.
Right.
Yeah.
So now before you started your coaching business and the great work that you do now, you worked as an advertising executive, right?
Mm-hmm.
I did. How many years did you do that work?
All told 15.
15, wow.
Yeah.
So that was your career, right?
Yep. Yeah. So for 10 years, I was an advertising executive, and then I moved into the director of advertising for the firm I worked for. And actually, in my early years, I was, and actually, this is also where I kind of cut my teeth on entrepreneurship. I was in outside sales. And that's where I really learned about time management, because I was working on straight commission. Mm-hmm. And I developed some really great habits around discipline about my time, and also over-pleasing and overextending to keep my customers happy, because I was relying on that for my paycheck.
Right, and knowing how to sell, I would imagine, was a great lesson too.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And I've never thought of selling. I never thought of myself as a salesperson, but what I love to do is help people. And to me, that's really, really fun. So the rest just kind of falls into place.
Mm-hmm. And then after being an ad exec, you opened your nutrition business.
I did. So when I was the advertising director, we had a new general manager come on, and I remember a lot of the department heads were kind of upset because he was great at delegating, and we were suddenly responsible for managing, the budgets and doing forecasting and all these things we never had done before. I loved it. And 2 years later, I sat down with the owner of the company and the general manager, and I said, this is your fault that I'm giving you my resignation, because I have learned so much and I now have the confidence to lead my own business. And I bought a nutrition and skincare store.
Interesting. So it was actually your career and what you were learning. Well, I guess a lot of us do that in some form or another. The things that you're learning in your career, you can take into entrepreneurship. But for you, it just was the perfect training ground with sales and then learning basically how to run your own business.
Yeah, it was, and for the missing link for me was the behind the scenes, the numbers, the managing finances. And once I had a grasp for that, and also I knew I couldn't go any further with this particular company. And I'm somebody that every 7 to 10 years I change things up. And
me too.
Yeah. And it's usually there's some sort of correlation between what I was doing and now it's just time for a new rendition and to write a new chapter.
So what attracted you to the nutrition and skincare business?
Well, this is sort of funny. I was really clear that, and what I did is I was still working for the media firm, and I launched a thought, and my thought was, I want to own my own business. I want it to be something that helps somebody. I don't want it to be retail. And then that manifested, but it was about 2 years later. So when people ask me how do you do that? And I always say, just launch the thought and the universe will start to line up for you.
Now tell us what you mean about that. Yeah. I love that phrasing, launch the thought.
I've
never heard that.
You know that there's that saying, have a desire and the universe conspires to meet your needs. That's not quite it. But yeah, so launch the thought is you have something, a desire, a wish, something you want to achieve, launch it. But the key is not having a roadmap how you're going to get there. Just launch the thought along with how would it make you feel. Because you need to allow for spaciousness, for synchronicities, to follow those signs, for opportunities to show themselves. And if you've got it hardwired or mapped out, see, I used to be I had to have a map for everything. And if things weren't going as I mapped out, then I got into push mode and I made them go that way. And I tell you, my life has unfolded in such miraculous ways when I threw that map out and just launched the thought along with, all right, this is what I really desire to do. If it's for my highest and greatest good, let it happen. And this is why, and this is how it's going to make me feel. This is what I want to feel.
I love that. I'm soaking it up, writing it down and soaking it up, Suzy. That's so good. It's so good. And learning how to, and I say this often, but I admit I'm like this too, because I love a plan and strategizing things out and how I'm going to do it, the how. But you have to let go of the how, because a lot of times, even if we plan it, it doesn't necessarily work exactly as planned.
Yeah, a lot of times, exactly.
Yes, and I love too the focus on how you want it to make you feel. Yes.
So to get back to buying my nutrition store, so the two things I was really clear about, I wanted to help other people. I did not want it to be retail. I ended up buying a retail store. How that ever, well, I know how that came about, but it ended up being the perfect circumstance for the next 10 years.
Now, did you fight that at all because you had mapped out, you launched the thought, and part of that was not being no, you didn't?
No, I didn't, because the synchronistic, magical events that led me to opening that nutrition store, I knew, I'm a very spiritual person, I knew that it was guided.
And you trusted that.
And I trusted that.
Now, tell us about the moment. So you've had your nutritious business for 10 years. Tell us about the moment, though, when you realized you were addicted to busyness.
Well, here's the tough thing about busyness is you don't know you're in busyness. For most of us don't. We have a dialogue going on that's more of, oh, I feel so overwhelmed. I'm depleted. I'm tired. I'm so busy. And I know we're going to hopefully get to this subject too, but I know in my store or with my store, and a lot of my friends were all business owners, managers, and we'd cross paths and go, oh my God, I wish I had more balance in my life, and we should get together and have a talk about that. But we never did because we were all so busy. So I'm so sorry. I lost my train of thought.
How did you know that you were addicted to busyness? It's okay.
See, this is what happens with busyness. You get so wrapped in the work, I like totally drop back in. It took a friend, my dear friend Barbara Stanny. We were walking one day, and she said, Suzy, I was telling her everything that was going on. She said, Suzy, you are addicted to busyness. That was my wake-up call.
Did you ask her, what do you mean? Were you surprised? Because sometimes I feel like when we're called on those things, we think, what do you mean? I'm busy. I'm, quote unquote, making it happen. Something I'm trying to stop saying. So
oh,
much,
absolutely.
right?
I absolutely asked her, what does that mean? And she said, you're doing so much. You never stop. Mm-hmm. And then I was taking one of her, she used to lead these wonderful retreats called Sacred Success. And I had just gone through one of her retreats, and I had an hour coaching appointment with her, and she said, we're going to do, so I'm in the nutrition business, she said, we're going to do the Suzy's busyness detox plan. So this is going to sound really simple, but one of the first things I did, so I would go to work, I would come home, and I have the personality where I really like to be on top of everything always, and I like everything organized and in its place. And so I would come home from my day at my business, and I wouldn't stop. I'd be opening the mail, I'd be filing things away, I'd be prepping for dinner. So the very first thing I did was come home from work, and I'd stop for 20 minutes. So I started to integrate transition time into my day. And even during my day, if I was working on a project, instead of just going from one project right into the next project, I'd pause for a while. So I had this transition time.
What did you do during that transition time? Did you meditate, or did you just take some time to relax?
Sometimes it was just closing my office door and leaning back and closing my eyes for just a few minutes, or getting outside, going for a quick walk. I love this breathing technique where you put one palm of your hand on your forehead and the other palm on the back of your head. And then you breathe in really deeply through your nose. And as you breathe out, you say, ah. Doesn't that feel good?
Yes.
And even doing that just 3 times when you're transitioning, or if you feel yourself, and I think all of us know this feeling where we're so wound up. I call it my buzzed out feeling, where at times I'm literally standing in the middle of the room going, oh my God, what am I going to do next? That's a fantastic time to use that technique of the hand on the forehead, hand on the back, and the 3 deep breaths, and just say, ah.
Mm-hmm. Just slows you down and gets you grounded again.
Yeah, I liken it to taking the gas, your foot off the gas pedal and shifting into cruise.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Coasting just for a little while.
Right, exactly.
Did you notice that it made a very marked difference in how you were operating throughout your day, and that busyness feeling?
It did. It made a huge difference. Again, using that analogy of taking your foot off the gas pedal, and when you're flying down the highway and you're a passenger, let's say you're a passenger, and everything is whirling by or whizzing by. You really can't focus on anything because you're going too fast. When you slow down, suddenly you can see, what is the next thing I should be working on? Or I can see the tree. I can see in this whole pile of everything I think I should be doing, oh, there's actually this one thing that's most important.
Now, how do most of us as women, and the women that or clients, I don't know if you work with just women, but the clients that you work with, how do most of us end up in that busyness state?
Okay, well, I specifically work with women, but I've had a lot of fun with this because my husband is a type A person, and he has been able to completely unwind himself from reading my blogs and just, our conversations we have. And he also has a lot of some of these traits that we women do. But women are innately nourishers, pleasers, and givers. And these are all beautiful traits that trip us up. And as children, we women have been socialized for thousands of years. I mean, women and girls have been socialized for thousands of years to get along with others, to not hurt anybody's feelings, and take care of loved ones. So we've literally been programmed to do everything for everybody.
Right, and be a good girl.
And be a good girl, right. So what I realized as I began to unwind from my busyness was that my life on the outside was exactly how it should look. I was busy. I was doing a lot. I was volunteering. I was raising my son. Within that period, I was also a single mom for a long time. I was doing everything that our culture says you should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't doing anything for myself.
And something as simple as those, simple but powerful, taking those deep breaths is something you're doing for yourself. I think that's something people don't realize too. Even simple things like stopping, closing your door, taking a few minutes to breathe is something you're doing is self-care.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely.
What would you say are the very real dangers some of us might not be aware of living a life of being addicted to busyness? We know how we can stop, but what are the dangers of not stopping?
I spent months, I actually hired a research firm to help me with this, and I did some really in-depth qualitative research, and I interviewed women from around the world. And I'd say every single interview, I felt like I was interviewing myself. So what the real dangers are is if women keep going at this pace, the fatigue grows, the depletion grows. And what happened with many of the women I interviewed was all of them ended up with some sort of illness, whether it was mental illness or adrenal fatigue, heart issues, digestion issues. So the very real danger is you're on a train wreck path to really messing up your health.
And a lot of times we don't realize that stress can be a cause of a lot of the health problems that we have. We think it's something else, or it's hereditary, or it's everything else but us being addicted to busyness. Yeah.
Stress, going back to my nutrition days, is it causes inflammation, and inflammation is precursor to almost every disease. Stress boosts our cortisol levels, which is our blood sugar, and it boosts our adrenaline, and we literally become addicted to adrenaline. And then in that mix, you throw caffeine, and you literally you've got an addiction.
Right.
And you're hardwiring your brain to be busy. That's what I did. I mean, all of us are. Our brains are very plasticky, and we train our brains, and we start to hardwire them in certain ways. And for women who are feeling busy and overwhelmed, they've hardwired their brain to live this way, and they are addicted to adrenaline. Mm-hmm. And what happened with me is I blew my adrenals out. I had level 4 adrenal fatigue.
Wow. And what does that translate to for those of us who don't know?
Extreme fatigue. So when some of the signs of adrenal fatigue, and there's different layers to it, but if you're having a hard time waking up in the morning, if you feel that you're pushed to your edge easily, depression can fall in there, having a hard time falling asleep, waking up in the middle of the night, goodness, there's so many, but those are some of the main ones. And I think one of the ones I hear most often is when you are pushed to the edge, when it doesn't take much anymore to push you into that meltdown mode, mm-hmm. and you can't multitask.
Right.
Which you shouldn't be anyways, but I know when I was younger, I was very proud of my multitasking skills.
Right. But they say it's really task shifting, right? You're not really multitasking.
Yeah, exactly. I love that phrase, task shifting. Yeah.
Now, I know on your site you have a great sign-up program for people to learn the 4 steps of breaking the cycle of overwhelm for us as women. What would you say is the first step? Where do we begin? Or one key step, if not the first?
Well, I always say the first step is awareness. Mm-hmm. And what I've seen happen is that people become aware that what they're doing isn't working. And they don't really know why yet, but it's just that they're feeling unsettled, and they're not quite happy with the trajectory that their life is going. And then they'll start asking questions. And some of the questions I encourage both women and men to ask are, why are you doing what you are doing? And one of the most important is, what need is you doing, or perhaps you're overdoing fulfilling? And why are you saying yes? What are you saying yes to, and why? And that's a fantastic place to start. Along with, and this is one of the first steps I took, and I call it taking 10. And starting out the morning, if you have to just get up a little bit earlier, you can do this, is take 10 minutes of silence. So set the alarm, your timer on your cell phone. Put your cell phone in airplane mode so you don't get any disturbances. And then just sit quietly for 10 minutes, or even 5 minutes. I mean, I started out with 5 minutes. It's really incredible how quickly you are able to start to slow your mind down with this process. I started out with 10 minutes, and I likened thoughts to clouds. As thoughts came in, I just let them float by. This is obviously, it's a form of meditation, but a lot of people get caught up in the perfectionism of meditation, and that's not what this is all about. It's just taking 10 minutes of time for yourself. Close your eyes. And in the beginning, I had a pad of paper next to me, and if there's something came up that I knew I was going to chew on, I would just write it down. But within about 3 weeks, I was sitting there with my eyes closed for 40 minutes. And I began to love it. In fact, I had to course correct a little bit.
I can't spend 3 hours meditating.
Because there is a sense of peace that just started to grab hold of me. And that was where I started. But what I was doing was starting to retrain my brain to slow down and to take a break.
Yes. And I love thank you for sharing that tactic. That's fantastic. And I will say, just as I can attest to, even on my own, a lot of the things you said, but I'll just pull out a couple. Putting your phone in airplane mode. I do that every night, so I don't have any interruptions. And then I don't turn it on until after I do just what you said, have at least 10 minutes of focused silence. Not just, I didn't run into anybody in the morning yet, so I haven't spoken yet, but making sure you set aside time to do that. But what I don't do, and I'm going to start doing based on what you just said, is having a notepad or something nearby, so when something crosses, you can just jot it down, as opposed to another thing you mentioned, this perfectionist idea of what meditation needs to look like. Oh, I'm not supposed to think of anything. I'm supposed to clear my mind. It sort of lets that go. And I love that.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's no right way to do this.
Yes. Oh, thank you for saying that. Because I think that might be a reason a lot of people stay away from it, right? I know I'll speak for myself. I used to try meditation years ago when people were really beginning to talk about it. People have been doing it for thousands of years. But when we became more conscious of it, I would think, how come I can't clear my mind like everyone else says? I'm always thinking about something, and I thought I was doing it wrong. So I would stop.
We flip into comparison.
Exactly. Comparison, critic. Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Trying to get it right. So that's great. That's great advice, Suzy. Something that you mentioned, you posted on Instagram about balance, which we spoke about a little bit earlier. And it said, when balance occurs, there is no movement, and movement is essential to life. So should we stop pursuing balance? What are your thoughts on balance? Tell us.
We should stop pursuing the perfection of balance. From my own experience, when I was, feeling so overwhelmed, balance was on my thought every day. How can I achieve balance? And I was trying all sorts of things. I would clean up my desk. I would start new systems. But what I learned was I was trying to find what I learned what my want was, is I wanted balance every single day. Mm-hmm. Today, what I do is I embrace those moments of balance. So to me, balance is an ebb and flow. And there's times when things are really are flowing, and that's when you're moving and grooving and creating, and you probably are a bit busier. And then there's I think of the tides, and then there's the ebb where, that isn't going as it should be. That's the sign to slow down and go in and take some time to be introspective, which so many of us don't do, or what I did not used to do. So this idea of balance is wonderful. You definitely want to have some, work-life balance, but think about what balance means to you. Are you trying to achieve this 24/7 state of peace and well-being? Because that's just not how life is.
Right. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
I always tell people, think of it too like a scale with two sides. It's never quite even. Sometimes it goes heavier on one side, sometimes the other, but it's still balancing in a way. Or if you're on a tightrope with the people who have the straight bar across, they don't just go straight across. It goes one way. You have to balance it. Yes. And balance looks different for everyone.
Mm-hmm. And I always think of the teeter-totter as a child.
Yes.
And when you're going up and down on the teeter-totter, that's when you're having the most fun.
Right. In fact, that Instagram, I think that was the image.
Oh, was it? Okay.
That's why I was drawn to it. Yeah. I think that was with the quote, actually.
Yeah. So it's not when that teeter-totter is straight out. So really embracing and creating spaciousness in your life. This is so important, is having that white space in every day. So you have time to enjoy balance.
Did you have a teeter-totter when you were younger, Suzy?
No, I didn't.
Okay, I was going to say, this picture looks like it's like you as a little girl or something.
No, I didn't. There was a playground nearby. I just loved teeter-totters.
Yes.
But the other beautiful thing about incorporating spaciousness into your day is on most days you get to use that space for relaxing and enjoying that sense of peace and calm. But then there's those days where everything goes out off in the left field. And suddenly that spaciousness becomes your padding so you don't get pushed into overwhelm.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about, and you mentioned this, what do you think about for women who are, whether single moms or not, but raising young children at this stage and sometimes feel like their day starts when their child gets up? I have a friend who used to go through that. When they get up, I get up, and then the day is crazy. And I was thinking, because when they get up, you get up, as opposed to getting up a little bit earlier. Is that something you suggest that women figure out how to, that could be, I should say, one way to create some space, getting up before your children wake up?
Oh, absolutely. And I did that when my son was young. And it doesn't mean you have to get up 2 hours ahead of time, but even 20 minutes. I mean, get up out of bed, get yourself a cup of tea, crawl back into bed with that cup of tea. I do that. I still do this. Mm-hmm. For 20 minutes or whatever you can work into that morning. It is decadent.
And that you own your morning.
And you're owning your morning. And you're also mornings are my favorite part of the day because to me, it's setting the tone for the rest of the day. So part of my morning ritual is that quiet time that we spoke of earlier, and also setting my intention for the day ahead.
Do you get up at the same time every day? I'm just curious. Or about the same time every day?
Yeah, I don't wake up to an alarm anymore. That's one of the beautiful things with how I am setting up my entrepreneurial life. But as a general rule, I wake up pretty early, around 6 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love that cup of tea in the morning. All for it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you also advise women on how to build a powerful support network, which we're all about.
Uh-huh.
So what's one important tip for women in building their own support network? Who or what should they be looking for?
Well, number one is, it is amazing how we tend, especially women, we tend to think we're the only one that's feeling a certain way. And what really blew my mind is when I created my support network was how often all of us thought we were the only one that was feeling a certain way, but how all of us were actually feeling that way. So what I did, my very first thing was I reached out and asked. And it wasn't, there was a couple women in my town that I admired, but I didn't know them really well. And I actually invited them over. And we sat down and talked, and I told them I wanted to create a group of women that would support each other. So essentially, I interviewed them. Mm-hmm. And this all came from my friend Barbara Stanny, and she has this term. It's called spotters groups. And it comes from, when you go to a gym and men are lifting heavy weights and they'll holler out, hey, can somebody spot me?
Right.
You never see women do that, do you?
No, because we can do it all by ourselves.
Exactly. So the premise behind Barbara's idea for a spotters group was to create a spotters group, so we women can support each other in lifting the heavier weights in life. So after one of Barbara's retreats, that's what I did. And I interviewed 2 women. Barbara is my neighbor, so I invited her and one other woman. And we've been meeting once a month now for I think we just passed our 5-year mark. We started in October. And it has been one of the most profound, life-changing experiences in my life. And of course, or for us anyways, we all joined in because 4 out of 5 of us had businesses, and one of us was in upper management. And so we were all thinking, oh, this is about business. Well, it wasn't about business.
Right. Once you get together, so many other things come up, right?
Yeah. I can tell you, I would not be where I am today without this type of support. These women have become my soul sisters. And we each have our own group of friends, and the term today often is used as, our own tribe. But these are, like I mentioned earlier, I am an only child. And I have never had people in my life that when the shit hits the fan, if it's 2 a.m. in the morning, I've got somebody I can call now. And I've had to do that.
That's amazing. That's powerful. Yeah. And I know so many people now, the language is out there about masterminds and these kinds of things. But whatever, for everyone listening to know, just as what you just said, whatever it looks like, if you have some people, they might not be your besties, but women that you admire or who are doing similar kind of work, who you feel like you can trust to come together and who will be committed in this way, this 5-year commitment, committed in this way to come together. I don't know if you do it at a certain time. You meet each month, did you say? Each week?
Yeah, each week. And we try to change it. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. We meet every month. And how we do it is we set the time ahead of time.
Right.
And usually we meet around 4:30. That just is what works for everybody. In the beginning, we set allotted time for each person to share, and we quickly threw that out the window. So when I go to my spotters group meeting, my husband knows I'll get home when I get home. And a lot of times, our meetings are 2 hours, but we've gone 4 hours before. We go deep.
Now, when you say you threw the sort of hot seat kind of method out of the way, was it because people needed more, each woman needed more time, or was it just sort of whoever was going through something, you get the floor?
Well, every one of us always shares. We always do. But there's usually somebody that has more going on than the other person. And it's just amazing, when you talk about balance, there's always this universal balance that happens within the meeting. And there's never been all 5 of us going through something at the same time, ever. So we're able to allow that person to have more time. One thing we don't do is we never drink alcohol, because alcohol makes you wobbly, and those weights wobble.
Right. When you're spotting, right.
And we don't interrupt. So the person has a chance to say, I liken it to getting dust bunnies out of the back of the closet. It's my chance every month to get whatever has collected out. And it's also a chance to celebrate. So it's not just about, these are my challenges. This is, oh my God, this just happened. It's a chance to brag.
Right.
And be witnessed.
Without apology.
Yeah, without apology. And so each person has a chance to talk about whatever they want to talk about. And if there's a pause, we let them have that silence. Because how often in life do we get a chance to just be in quiet and collect our thoughts without somebody jumping in with advice? Or women love to fix. Because we're helpers or trying to fix it for the person. And I know for me, that's where some of the most profound learning has come from, because in that process of sharing, it's like therapy for myself. I start to figure things out. And then when we're through, I usually say I'm complete, and my soul sisters will offer reflection.
Reflection based on whatever you shared.
Yeah, yeah.
I love that. I love the idea too of making sure that there are no interruptions, because as you said, it's always usually well intentioned when people try to interrupt once you're silent and give you an idea because they want to help you get past whatever it is. But sometimes you need that space. We talked about space earlier.
Yes.
Very powerful. So for women listening who are thinking about or who want to now create their own group, and it doesn't have to be 5 or a certain number. It could be just, right, 2 of you, 3 of you, however many. Do you think that as far as all being entrepreneurs or all being, even though your group is mixed, everyone have to be in the same kind of business, or should it just be women that you can connect with?
I think it should just be women you can connect with, and actually having a varied group brings a lot of wisdom to the table, because it really doesn't matter. I mean, you could have an attorney, you could have somebody who's working at a fast food restaurant. Underneath there, you always have similar challenges. And looking at things from a different angle, having different people's perspectives is extraordinarily enlightening. So really, I think the most important thing is just to invite women or people that you resonate with, or you want to get to know better.
Right. What would you say, Suzy, entrepreneurship has taught you about yourself as a woman?
Oh my goodness. Entrepreneurship is the perfect opportunity to heal yourself. For me, it has brought up so many pieces that I had tucked away in a dark vault and tossed the key away. And as I stepped into entrepreneurship, goodness, owning my own business, can't talk now. My life, my things in life that challenge me bubbled to the surface. So what it has done for me is allowed me to come back to my true self. The self-comparison, the self-doubt, the not being enough. This has really been a journey in owning who I am. And that I am enough as who I am.
Absolutely. I love it. So in closing, if you think over your life and career and you had the chance to thank only one person whose support was critical to you personally or professionally, who would that be and what would you say?
Well, that was so easy. So a woman named Barbara Stanny. She started out as just somebody I knew of because she published a book. And then I joined a support group that she was in. But it was one where it was a group of women and we met at a bar, and it didn't have much depth to it. And then I ended up building a house on the other side of the woods of where Barbara lived. And we started walking together. And she's now become my wiser older sister. But I have learned, I feel like she's been mentoring me the last decade. She's become the support in my life that I might cry here, that I never had from my mother. I have this woman that cheers me on, that believes in me. I've just learned so much from her. So that is the easiest question for me to answer. It's Barbara.
That's beautiful. I've heard so many wonderful things about Barbara Stanny. I'm going to, for everyone listening, I'll make sure I link to her website and everything, but people who personally know her have nothing but praise.
I feel like I'm one of the luckiest women on the face of the earth to have her in my life and so close by as well.
Right, right. And nothing more powerful than women supporting women, I always say.
Absolutely.
So now tell us how we can support you. Tell everyone your website, social media, any other ways that we can get in touch with you. I'll have links to everything, but just so everyone can hear it.
Okay, sure. So my website is suzycarroll.com, and it's SUZYCARROLL.com. And under that same name, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and I'm just starting to Twitter.
It's okay. It's slowing down anyway, other than one person who uses it every morning.
Okay, and yeah, exactly. Not me. and a little bit more on Instagram, but I definitely enjoy Facebook and Instagram the most. And then I love to write, so I send out a blog as a general every other week, and I am getting ready to launch a mini course called The Uncluttered Woman. Overcome overwhelm, and I've really boiled it down to the essentials, and I'm launching it November 1st. So if they sign up for my email list, they can find out more about that.
Fantastic. And I think I saw that on your website. You can sign up for it, right?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, in fact, at the top of my website, you can sign up for a free download on the 4 steps to breaking the cycle of overwhelm, or just scroll down a bit and just sign up for the newsletter.
Perfect. Suzy, thank you so much. This was so fun. And I honestly was taking notes. I always take notes, but for different reasons, I was taking your notes. A lot of what you said really resonated with me, and I'm sure with a lot of our listeners. So thank you so much for being so open and sharing your story too.
Oh, you're so welcome. This is very enjoyable. Thank you, Elaine.
Thank you. Before you go, what's a parting piece of advice from you to our listeners about anything?
A question that has really helped shape my life, and it comes from the Course of Miracles, is, above all else, let me see this differently. So when you hit a stumbling block in your day, a fabulous question to ask is, how can I see this differently?
I love it. Suzy Carroll, hold on for just a second.
Okay, will do.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Suzy Carroll. Make sure you go to supportissexypodcast.com and just search Suzy, SUZY, in the search box. Her show notes page will pop up with all of the links and the resources for ways that you can get in touch with her, follow her, and find out about the course that she has coming up very soon. Go to supportissexypodcast.com and just search Suzy, SUZY. Now, whether you've been listening to the podcast for the first time today, thank you for being here, or you've been listening to 300 plus episodes, I really appreciate you. What I want you to make sure you do is subscribe so that you don't miss a thing. Whatever platform you're listening on, please make sure that you subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss anything. We're here for you, sharing these stories of women entrepreneurs around the world. So please just hit subscribe. Also, if you love it, please take just 2 minutes. It might not even take you 2 minutes, but please take just 2 minutes to leave a review. I always say I'd love a 5-star review, but any feedback from you is appreciated. So again, wherever you're listening, leave a review. It helps me know how things are going, how you're enjoying it, and it also helps the show. So I would love to get a review from you. All right. So again, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. We'll be back here for you tomorrow. And until then, you know what to do. Go out there and create something sexy, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.